She thought the expensive black leather bag belonged to some rich businessman who'd never notice it was gone. Until 3 days later, when a man in a $1,000 suit showed up at her apartment door, holding her beat-up canvas bag like it contained the secrets to her soul. That's when Zara Williams realized she'd accidentally switched bags with someone at JFK Airport. What she didn't know was that the man standing in her doorway was Phoenix Blackwell, the youngest billionaire in New York City. And what he didn't know was that finding her would change everything he thought he knew about love. Zara Williams was exhausted, 26 years old, working 2 jobs just to keep her head above water in Brooklyn, and now she was flying back from her grandmother's funeral in Atlanta with nothing but heartache and a canvas bag full of memories. JFK Airport was a nightmare that Tuesday morning. Flight delays, angry passengers, and Zara just wanted to get home to her tiny apartment and cry in peace. She grabbed what she thought was her bag from the conveyor belt and rushed to catch the subway. 3 hours later, Phoenix Blackwell stood in his Manhattan penthouse, staring at a worn canvas bag that definitely wasn't his. Inside, instead of his crucial merger documents, he found photo albums, handwritten letters, and a small wooden jewelry box that smelled like vanilla and old roses. Phoenix had never been curious about a stranger before. At 28, he'd built his empire by staying focused, keeping emotions out of business. But something about these photos, a beautiful black woman laughing with an elderly lady, graduation pictures, family gatherings, made him pause. Then he found the address written on the back of an envelope, Brooklyn, a world away from his Fifth Avenue life. When Phoenix knocked on Zara's apartment door that Thursday evening, she almost didn't answer. She'd been crying for 3 days straight, mourning her grandmother and worried sick about her missing family photos. The knock was soft, hesitant, not like the usual pounding from her upstairs neighbor complaining about noise. "Are you Zara Williams?" His voice was deep, careful, with a gentleness that made her pause. She opened the door slowly, and her breath caught in her throat. This man looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, tall, with beautiful mixed-race features and the most striking green eyes she'd ever seen. They seemed to look right through her, but not in an intrusive way, more like he was trying to understand something important. And he was holding her grandmother's worn canvas bag like it was made of precious crystal. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to her heart. "I thought it was gone forever." For a moment, they just stood there looking at each other. Phoenix felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the Brooklyn summer heat. This woman was beautiful, yes, but there was something else. Pain in her dark eyes, but also strength. Like she'd been through storms but hadn't let them break her. "I think this is yours," Phoenix said softly, and when their hands touched as he passed her the bag, something electric shot between them. Both of them felt it. That spark that happens maybe once in a lifetime if you're lucky. "I'm Phoenix Blackwell," he said, his voice catching slightly. The name meant nothing to Zara. She didn't read business magazines or follow celebrity gossip. She was too busy working 2 jobs and trying to survive in one of the most expensive cities in the world. To her, he was just a kind stranger who'd taken the time to return her most precious possessions. "Zara Williams," she said, clutching the bag to her chest. How did you find me?" "Your address was on an envelope inside," Phoenix explained. "I hope that's okay." "I just thought, these photos looked important." Tears filled Zara's eyes again. "They're all I have left of her." Something in her voice broke Phoenix's heart. Without thinking, he asked, "Are you okay?" The question was so genuine, so full of real concern from a complete stranger, that Zara almost started crying right there in the doorway. "Would you like some coffee?" she found herself asking. "I mean, you came all the way to Brooklyn?" Phoenix had 17 missed calls on his phone, board meetings, conference calls, a merger worth $200 million waiting for his attention. His assistant had probably sent out search parties, but looking at this woman's tear-stained face, none of that seemed to matter. "I'd like that very much," he said. Zara's apartment was tiny, probably smaller than Phoenix's walk-in closet, but it felt like a home in a way his penthouse never had. Photos covered every surface, plants grew on the windowsill despite the fire escape blocking most of the light, and everything felt lived in and loved. The complete opposite of his sterile, professionally decorated space uptown. She made coffee in a little French press, her hands shaking slightly as she poured. Phoenix noticed she only had 2 mugs, both mismatched, probably from thrift stores. Everything in her apartment looked secondhand but cared for. "Tell me about her," Phoenix said gently, pointing to a photo of Zara with the elderly woman from the pictures. In the photo, both women were laughing, Zara's head thrown back with joy while the older woman looked at her with pure love. And that's when the dam broke. For the next 3 hours, not 2 but 3 full hours, Zara told him everything. About her grandmother Rosa, who had raised her after her parents couldn't. About working at a nonprofit during the day and tutoring kids, at night to make ends meet. About dreams of becoming a social worker, but not having money for graduate school. She told him about Rosa's garden, how she grew tomatoes on the fire escape and always said plants needed love more than sunlight. About Sunday dinners where Rosa would cook for half the neighborhood. About how Rosa had worked 3 jobs to put Zara through college, never complaining, always believing Zara would do something important with her life. Phoenix listened like no one had ever listened to her before. He asked questions that showed he was really hearing her, not just waiting for his turn to talk, but genuinely interested in understanding who she was. When she laughed at memories of Rosa's terrible singing voice, he laughed too. When she cried talking about the funeral, about how empty the world felt without Rosa's voice calling her baby girl, he handed her tissues without making her feel weak or embarrassed. "She sounds like an incredible woman," Phoenix said softly when Zara finally ran out of words. "She was everything to me," Zara whispered. "I don't know how to exist in a world without her." Phoenix was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee mug in his hands. "My mother died when I was 12, he said finally. I remember thinking the same thing. Like the world had forgotten to keep spinning. There was something in his voice, old pain, carefully buried but still there, that made Zara look at him, really look at him for the first time that evening. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "It gets different," Phoenix said. "Not better exactly, but different. You learn to carry the love instead of the loss." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in memories. When Phoenix finally looked at his watch, it was past midnight. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "You need to rest." But neither of them moved. Neither wanted this strange, perfect evening to end. When Phoenix finally left, walking down the narrow hallway to the stairs, both of them felt like something fundamental had changed. Zara closed her door and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it had in months. Phoenix sat in his car outside her building for 20 minutes, staring up at her lit window, feeling more connected to another human being than he had in his entire adult life. Something had shifted for both of them, something that would change everything. Phoenix couldn't stop thinking about Zara. For the first time in his life, spreadsheets and profit margins felt meaningless. He'd catch himself staring out his office window at the city below, wondering what she was doing, if she was still sad about her grandmother, if she ever thought about their conversation. For 3 days, he fought the urge to see her again. He had no reason to contact her. He'd returned her bag, done his good deed. But her face kept haunting him. Not just her beauty, though she was stunning. It was the way she talked about her work, her eyes lighting up when she described helping kids with their homework, the passion in her voice when she explained how education could break cycles of poverty. Phoenix had been around passionate people before. Driven, ambitious people who wanted to climb ladders and accumulate wealth. But Zara's passion was different, pure. She wanted to lift others up, not climb over them. On Thursday, exactly a week after their first meeting, Phoenix found himself Googling the community center where Zara worked. The website was basic, clearly built on a shoestring budget. The mission statement talked about empowering underserved youth through educational support and community engagement. There were photos of smiling kids, volunteer tutors, a small computer lab with outdated equipment. Phoenix stared at his computer screen for an hour, reading every page twice. This was Zara's world. These were the people she spent her days trying to help, with resources that wouldn't cover lunch at the restaurant where Phoenix ate most business meetings. Without letting himself overthink it, he called his financial advisor. "I want to make a donation," he said. $50,000 to the Riverside Community Center in Brooklyn. 2 hours later, Phoenix stood in the center's lobby, holding an envelope and trying to convince himself this was about charity, not about seeing Zara again. The lobby was small and worn, but clean. Bulletin boards covered in bright construction paper displayed kids' artwork and community announcements. Folding chairs were stacked in one corner, and Phoenix could hear children's voices echoing from somewhere deeper in the building. "Phoenix?" Zara's voice came from behind him, and when he turned, his heart did something complicated in his chest. She looked tired, like she'd been working long hours, but beautiful. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Reading is fundamental," in faded letters. No makeup, no fancy clothes, but Phoenix thought she was the most gorgeous woman he'd ever seen. "What are you doing here?" she asked, and there was something careful in her voice. Surprised but maybe a little pleased too. "I wanted to contribute to your work," Phoenix said, hating how formal he sounded. He held out the envelope with hands that were, embarrassingly, shaking slightly. Zara took the envelope and opened it right there in the lobby. When she saw the check, her face went completely white. $50,000, she whispered, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something more reasonable. "I can't accept this," she said immediately, trying to hand it back to him. "This is too much." "This is crazy, I don't even know you." The word stung, even though Phoenix knew she was right. "You know me better than most people do," he said quietly, and the honesty in his voice surprised them both. Zara looked up at him, really looked at him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. There was something happening between them, something neither quite understood but both felt. "People don't just give away this kind of money," Zara said finally. "What do you want from me?" The hurt that flashed across Phoenix's face was genuine and immediate. "I don't want anything. After hearing you talk about your work, I believe in what you're doing. I want to help." But before Zara could respond, footsteps echoed in the lobby and Marcus appeared, carrying a stack of folders. Marcus Johnson was 28, had grown up in the neighborhood, and had been working at the community center for 5 years. He was also, though Zara didn't know it, quietly in love with her. Marcus took one look at Phoenix's expensive suit, the Rolex on his wrist, and the check in Zara's hands, and his expression hardened into something protective and suspicious. "Everything okay here, Zara?" His voice was cool, professional, but there was steel underneath. "This is Phoenix," Zara said, her discomfort obvious. "Phoenix, this is Marcus Johnson, my colleague." Phoenix extended his hand for a shake, but Marcus just crossed his arms over his chest. "Let me guess," Marcus said, his voice cutting. "Another rich boy from Manhattan trying to buy his way into something he doesn't understand. What is it this time? Tax write-off? Conscience salving? Or are you running for something and need some good photo ops in the hood?" "Marcus!" Zara protested, embarrassed, but Phoenix didn't defend himself or get angry. He just looked at Zara with those impossible green eyes and said quietly, "Think about it. The offer stands, no strings attached, just someone who believes in what you're doing." After he left, the silence in the lobby was thick and uncomfortable. "Zara, that man is trouble," Marcus said finally, setting down his folders and turning to face her. "Men like him don't just show up in neighborhoods like ours with $50,000 checks. They want something, they always want something." "What if he doesn't?" Zara asked, but her voice was uncertain. "Come on, Z, look at him, look at where we are. You think Prince Charming just randomly decided to play charity? Wake up." That night, Zara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the uncashed check on her nightstand. $50,000 could change everything for the center. New computers, supplies for a year, maybe even funding for the after-school program they'd had to cut due to budget constraints. But Marcus's words echoed in her head. What did Phoenix Blackwell really want? And why did the thought of never seeing him again make her chest ache? Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse, Phoenix poured himself a scotch and stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the lights of Brooklyn in the distance. He was falling in love with a woman who didn't trust him, and for the first time in his life, he had no idea how to fix a problem that money couldn't solve. 3 days passed before Zara called Phoenix. 3 long days where she weighed Marcus's warnings against the memory of Phoenix's gentle voice when he'd said, "You know me better," than most people do. She called his office, hands trembling as she dialed the number from his business card. "Blackwell Industries, Mr. Blackwell's office," came a crisp professional voice. Hi, this is Zara Williams. I was wondering if I could speak with Phoenix." There was a pause. "May I ask what this is regarding?" Zara's cheeks burned. Of course a billionaire didn't take random calls. "He made a donation to our community center. I wanted to discuss it." "One moment, please," The hold music felt like it lasted forever. Zara almost hung up twice before Phoenix's voice came through the phone. Zara? He sounded surprised, hopeful. Hi, I was wondering, could we maybe meet for coffee? To talk about your donation. The silence stretched so long that Zara wondered if the call had dropped. When Phoenix finally spoke, his voice was warm in a way that made her stomach flutter. I'd like that very much. When works for you? They met at a small cafe in Fort Greene, halfway between their two worlds. Phoenix arrived first, choosing a corner table where they could talk privately. When Zara walked in, scanning the cafe nervously, Phoenix felt his heart skip. She wore a simple sundress and cardigan, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked beautiful and uncertain. Thank you for coming, Phoenix said as she sat down, and Zara was struck again by how genuine he seemed. I almost didn't call, she admitted. My friend Marcus thinks you're up to something. Phoenix's smile was sad around the edges. What do you think? Zara studied his face, the strong jawline, those incredible green eyes, the way he seemed to be holding his breath waiting for her answer. I think you're the first person who's listened to me talk about my work and actually heard what I was saying, she said finally. I think you understand why it matters. Something in Phoenix's chest loosened. It does matter, what you're doing. It's real. It's important in a way most things aren't. Most rich people I've met see community work as charity, Zara said carefully. Something nice they can do to feel good about themselves. But when you were listening to me talk about it, you didn't look like someone thinking about tax deductions. I wasn't, Phoenix said simply. I was thinking about how lucky those kids are to have someone who cares about them the way you do. They talked for 2 hours that first coffee date. Then Phoenix walked her to the subway station, and neither wanted to say goodbye. Would you like to have lunch sometime? Phoenix asked as they stood at the top of the subway stairs. I'd like that, Zara said, and meant it. Lunch turned into weekly coffee dates. Coffee dates turned into long walks through Prospect Park, where Zara told Phoenix about the kids she tutored, and he told her about growing up wealthy, but lonely. Phoenix had been raised by nannies while his businessman father built an empire and traveled constantly. His mother had died of cancer when he was 12, and his father had dealt with grief by working even more, leaving Phoenix essentially alone in a house too big for a grieving child. I used to eat dinner by myself every night, Phoenix told her as they sat by the lake in the park, watching ducks paddle in circles. Cook would make these elaborate meals and serve them in this huge dining room, and I'd sit there at a table built for 12, doing homework and eating alone. That sounds awful, Zara said softly, her heart breaking for the lonely little boy he'd been. I thought it was normal, Phoenix admitted, until I started going to friends' houses and saw families eating together, talking about their days, laughing over dinner. That's when I realized what I was missing. Don't you get lonely now? Zara asked. In that big penthouse all by yourself? Phoenix looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. I used to think being alone and being lonely were the same thing, he said quietly. Until I met you. The first kiss happened that evening as they stood outside Zara's apartment building. It had started to rain lightly, and Phoenix had walked her home under his umbrella, standing so close she could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. Zara, he said softly, and when she looked up at him, his eyes were full of something that made her heart race. Yes? Instead of answering with words, Phoenix cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. Soft at first, tentative, giving her every chance to pull away. But Zara didn't pull away. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, her whole body coming alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I should go upstairs, Zara whispered, but she didn't move. You should, Phoenix agreed, but his hands were still framing her face like she was something precious. They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, both knowing something fundamental had changed between them. Phoenix, Zara said finally. Yeah? I'm glad you brought my bag back. His smile was like sunrise. Best wrong bag I ever picked up. That night, Zara lay in bed touching her lips, replaying the kiss over and over. Across the city, Phoenix stood at his bedroom window looking toward Brooklyn, feeling like his life was finally beginning. But both of them knew that falling for each other was just the beginning of their story. The hard part, navigating their different worlds, facing other people's judgments, learning to trust that what they felt was real was still ahead of them. Neither could have imagined just how hard it was going to get. For 2 months, Zara and Phoenix fell into a beautiful routine. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates. Walks through the park became weekend trips to museums and small concerts in Brooklyn. Phoenix learned to navigate the subway system and fell in love with the way Zara's neighborhood came alive in the evenings. Kids playing in the streets, neighbors calling to each other from fire escapes, the sound of music floating from open windows. Zara, meanwhile, discovered that Phoenix was nothing like the wealthy men she'd imagined. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, remembered the names of the kids she tutored, and never once made her feel small or insignificant. When she talked about her dreams of opening more community programs, his eyes lit up with genuine interest. But there was something Phoenix wasn't telling her, and the weight of that secret was growing heavier every day. The truth came out on a rainy Thursday evening in October. They were curled up on Zara's couch, sharing takeout Chinese food and watching an old movie, when Phoenix's phone started buzzing incessantly. "I should probably get this," he said apologetically, glancing at the screen. But as he talked, something about board meetings and shareholder approvals and million-dollar figures, Zara began to really listen. This wasn't someone with a decent job, as Phoenix had vaguely described his work. This was someone making decisions that involved more money than Zara had ever imagined. When Phoenix hung up and turned back to her, Zara was staring at him with a strange expression. "Phoenix," she said carefully, "what exactly do you do for work?" Phoenix's stomach dropped. He'd been dreading this moment for weeks, knowing it was inevitable, but hoping he could find the right way to tell her. There was no right way, he realized now. There was just the truth. "I should have told you sooner," he began, setting down his carton of lo mein. "Told me what?" Phoenix took a deep breath. "I'm not just some guy with a decent job. I own Blackwell Industries, I'm Zara. I have a lot more money than you think." Zara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "How much more? Like you drive a BMW instead of taking the subway?" The silence stretched between them, and Zara felt something cold settling in her stomach. "Phoenix, how much money are we talking about?" "Forbes estimated my net worth at $1.2 billion last month," he said quietly, the words coming out in a rush. The takeout container slipped from Zara's hands, spilling noodles across her coffee table. She stared at Phoenix like she'd never seen him before. "You're a billionaire?" she whispered. "Zara, it doesn't change anything between us." "It changes everything!" Zara stood up so quickly she nearly knocked over her water glass. "You're a billionaire, and you've been sitting on my secondhand couch eating $15 Chinese food from containers? You've been taking the subway with me, walking through my neighborhood, meeting my friends, and you're worth more than entire countries?" "This is exactly why I didn't tell you," Phoenix said, standing too, his hands reaching for her. "I knew you'd react like this." "React like what? Like someone who just found out the person she's been dating has been lying to her for 2 months?" "I wasn't lying. You weren't telling the truth." Zara's voice cracked, and Phoenix could see tears building in her eyes. "Do you have any idea how this makes me feel? I've been worried about whether I could afford to split dinner checks with you. I've been embarrassed about my apartment, my clothes, my life, thinking you were just some nice guy who happened to be a little better off than me. Your apartment is perfect. You're perfect. Your life is real in a way mine never has been." "Stop it," Zara said, wrapping her arms around herself. "Just stop. I need to think. I need you to go." The pain in Phoenix's eyes was immediate and deep. "Zara, please. Let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been slumming it in Brooklyn? That dating a poor girl was some kind of adventure for you?" "It was never about that," Phoenix said desperately. "Zara, what we have is real. It's the most real thing in my life." But Zara was already shaking her head, tears flowing freely now. "I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know who you are." "I'm the same person who walked you home in the rain," Phoenix said, his voice breaking. "I'm the same person who listens to you talk about your work and thinks you're the most amazing woman in the world. The money doesn't change that, but it changes everything else," Zara whispered. "It changes the way you see me, the way other people will see us, the way I see myself. Phoenix, I was falling in love with someone I thought understood my world, but you don't understand it at all." "You've just been visiting it?" The words hung between them like a chasm neither knew how to cross. "I am in love with you," Phoenix said quietly. "That's the truest thing I know." Zara closed her eyes, more tears spilling over. I need time to think. Phoenix nodded slowly, understanding but dying inside. How much time? I don't know, Zara said honestly. I don't know anything right now. After Phoenix left, Zara sank back onto her couch and cried harder than she had since her grandmother's funeral. Not just because Phoenix had kept such a huge secret, but because she was in love with him too, and now she didn't know if that love was based on lies. Across the city, Phoenix sat in his empty penthouse, staring out at the lights of Brooklyn, wondering if he'd just lost the best thing that had ever happened to him. 2 weeks of painful silence stretched between Phoenix and Zara. Phoenix threw himself into work, but everything felt meaningless. He'd drive past Zara's neighborhood but never stop. He'd start to call her 100 times but never press send. What he didn't expect was for his father to show up at his penthouse on a Thursday evening, unannounced and clearly agitated. Richard Blackwell was 62 years old, silver-haired, and had built his own empire before passing the reins to Phoenix 5 years earlier. He was also a man who believed that business and personal life should align perfectly, and that marriage was just another form of strategic partnership. "We need to talk," Richard said, brushing past Phoenix into the living room without invitation. "Hello to you too, Dad," Phoenix said dryly, closing the door. "What's this about?" "Victoria came to see me," Richard said, turning to face his son. "She's concerned about you." "About this situation you've gotten yourself into." Phoenix's jaw tightened. What situation would that be? "Don't play games with me, Phoenix. This girl from Brooklyn, this social worker, Victoria showed me the photos. Her name is Zara," Phoenix said quietly, dangerously. "And what business is it of yours?" Richard pulled out his phone and showed Phoenix the same investigative photos Victoria had displayed weeks earlier. "This business. Do you have any idea what people are saying? The board is asking questions. Our investors are concerned about your judgment." "My personal life doesn't affect the company." "Everything affects the company," Richard exploded. "Phoenix, you're not just a man in love, you're the face of a billion-dollar empire. The decisions you make, the people you associate with, the woman you marry, it all reflects on Blackwell Industries." Phoenix felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Mary? Victoria tells me you've been seeing this girl for months. That you're serious about her. Phoenix, I've worked too hard building this family's legacy to watch you throw it away on some misguided romance." "Misguided?" Phoenix's voice was deadly quiet. "She's not one of us, son. She doesn't understand our world, our responsibilities, our expectations. What happens when she realizes what being with you really means? The scrutiny, the pressure, the constant judgment. She'll crumble under it, and she'll take you down with her." Richard moved to the bar and poured himself a scotch, as comfortable in Phoenix's apartment as if he owned it, which in many ways he did. Victoria, on the other hand, understands the game. She's been groomed for this life. She knows how to handle the media, the social obligations, the business requirements. She's perfect for you, Phoenix. She always has been. "I don't love Victoria," Phoenix said flatly. "Love?" Richard laughed, but it was a harsh sound. "Phoenix, love is a luxury we can't afford. Marriage is a business decision. You marry someone who elevates your position, not someone who drags you down to theirs." Phoenix stared at his father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in his adult life. "Is that what you thought about Mom?" Richard's expression softened slightly. "Your mother was different. She came from our world. She understood what was expected. Mom came from a middle-class family in Ohio," Phoenix said quietly. "She was a teacher when you met her. Hardly our world. That's different and you know it. How? How is it different?" Richard set down his glass harder than necessary. "Because your mother was white, Phoenix. Because she could fit in. Because people looked at her and saw someone who belonged. This girl, people look at her and see, what?" Phoenix's voice was dangerous now. "What do they see?" Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable, but he pressed on. "They see someone who's using you. Someone who doesn't belong in our circles. Someone who will embarrass you at charity galas and board meetings." "Phoenix, be practical. Get out," Phoenix said quietly. "Son, get out of my apartment. Now? And Dad?" Phoenix's green eyes were ice cold, just like they'd been with Victoria. "Don't come back until you're ready to apologize." After his father left, Phoenix called the one person he thought might understand, his mother's sister, Aunt Caroline, who lived in California and had always been more of a parent to him than his father ever was. "Phoenix, honey, what's wrong?" Caroline's warm voice came through the phone, and Phoenix almost broke down right there. "Dad wants me to marry Victoria," he said simply. "Oh, sweetheart, and what do you want?" "I want Zara," Phoenix said, his voice cracking. "I want the woman I love, but everyone's telling me it's impossible." "Tell me about her," Caroline said gently, and Phoenix did. He told her about the airport, about Zara's tiny apartment that felt more like home than anywhere he'd ever lived, about her work with kids and her dreams of changing the world one community at a time. He told her about how Zara laughed, how she saw the good in everything, how being with her made him want to be a better man. "She sounds wonderful," Caroline said when he finished. "She sounds like someone who makes you happy." "She does. She did." Phoenix's voice was small, but maybe everyone's right. Maybe we're too different. "Phoenix, let me tell you something your father never will. Love isn't about finding someone who fits your life perfectly. Love is about finding someone worth changing your life for. Your mother taught me that." "What do you mean?" "Your father likes to rewrite history, but when he met your mother, his parents were furious. Not because she was middle class, but because she was too independent, too outspoken, too unwilling to be the silent, decorative wife they expected. They threatened to disown him." Phoenix sat up straighter. "I never knew that. Your father chose love then. He fought for your mother against his entire family. And they were happy, Phoenix. Really, truly happy until the day she died. That's the man your father used to be, before grief and business hardened his heart." Caroline paused, and Phoenix could hear her moving around, probably making tea like she always did when she was thinking. "If this girl makes you happy, if she challenges you to be better, if you can't imagine your life without her, then fight for her. Don't let fear or other people's prejudices rob you of love." That night, Phoenix sat in his empty penthouse, looking out at the lights of Brooklyn, knowing that somewhere out there was the woman he loved. And for the first time since his father's visit, he felt something like hope. Maybe it was time to stop listening to everyone else and start fighting for what he wanted. The next 3 months were the darkest period of both their lives. Zara threw herself into work, staying late at the community center, taking on extra tutoring sessions. She turned down dates, avoided romantic movies, and pretended she didn't think about Phoenix every single day. Marcus tried to be supportive, but his "I told you so" attitude made everything worse. Even when he asked her out, something he'd been wanting to do for years, Zara turned him down gently. "You're still hung up on that rich boy," Marcus said, frustrated. "I'm just not ready to date anyone," Zara replied. But the truth was, no one would ever be Phoenix. Meanwhile, Phoenix was miserable in his own way. He buried himself in work, closed deals with ruthless efficiency, and avoided any place that might remind him of Zara. His penthouse felt more like a prison than ever. Victoria tried to rekindle their relationship, taking his coldness for availability. "We could be good together again," she said over dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant. "We understand each other's worlds." Phoenix looked at her, beautiful, successful, everything that made sense on paper, and felt absolutely nothing. "I'm not good company these days, Victoria. This is about that girl, isn't it? Phoenix, you're being ridiculous. You can have any woman you want. But I can't have the one I want," Phoenix said quietly. That's when it hit him. He'd given up the best thing in his life because he'd been scared. Scared that Zara couldn't love him for who he really was. Scared that everyone else was right about their differences. But being without her was so much worse than being scared. Phoenix's plan was simple, but risky. He liquidated $50 million of his personal assets and set up a foundation, the Rosa Williams Foundation for Community Development, named after Zara's grandmother. The foundation would fund community centers, educational programs, and social work scholarships across underserved communities. And he wanted Zara to run it. She'd never accept it, especially not from him. So he went through official channels, had his lawyers present it as an anonymous donation with specific requirements for the director position, requirements that perfectly matched Zara's qualifications and passions. "This foundation wants to offer you the position of executive director," the lawyer was saying. "Salary of $200,000 annually, full benefits, and complete autonomy to design programs as you see fit." "But who's funding this?" Zara asked. "The benefactor wishes to remain anonymous for now. They specified that you were the only candidate they wanted to consider." Zara's hands were shaking. This was everything she'd ever dreamed of. The chance to make a real difference, financial security, the respect that came with running a major foundation. "There's one more thing," the lawyer said. "The benefactor has invited you to a gala next Friday where you'll be formally introduced as the director. They'll reveal their identity then." The gala was held at the Plaza Hotel. Zara had never been somewhere so fancy in her life. She'd bought her first formal gown, a deep blue dress that made her feel beautiful and confident. She was networking with other nonprofit leaders when the lights dimmed and the host took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the founder of the Rosa Williams Foundation, Mr. Phoenix Blackwell." Zara's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. She watched in shock as Phoenix walked onto the stage looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. His eyes found hers in the crowd, and for a moment the whole room disappeared. "The Rosa Williams Foundation is named after a woman I never met, but who raised one of the most extraordinary people I know," Phoenix said into the microphone, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Rosa Williams taught her granddaughter that love means lifting others up, that strength comes from community, and that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they give." Zara was crying now, not caring that everyone could see. Zara Williams embodies everything this foundation stands for. Her work, her heart, her dedication to making the world better. That's why she's the only person who could lead this organization. After the speech, Zara tried to leave, but Phoenix caught up with her in the hotel lobby. "Zara, please wait." She turned, tears streaming down her face. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because I love you," Phoenix said simply. "Because I was an idiot who let fear and other people's opinions convince me that what we had wasn't real. Because I've been miserable every single day without you. You can't just throw money at problems, Phoenix. You can't buy me back. I'm not trying to buy you back. I'm trying to show you that I believe in your dreams, that I want to be part of making them come true, not because I have money, but because I love who you are." Zara was quiet for a long moment. "I love you too," she whispered finally. "I never stopped." "But Phoenix, people will always have opinions about us. Your friends, your business partners, even my friends and family. How do we get past that?" Phoenix stepped closer, taking her hands. "We get past it by choosing each other every single day, by not letting other people's fears become our fears." But it wasn't that simple. The next few weeks brought challenges from all sides. Victoria was furious about the foundation and Phoenix's public declaration of love. She started spreading rumors in their social circles that Zara was a gold digger who'd manipulated Phoenix. "You're making yourself a laughingstock," she told Phoenix at a board meeting. "The business community is watching. This affects all of us." Meanwhile, Marcus felt betrayed that Zara hadn't told him about her connection to Phoenix. "So you were lying to me this whole time?" He confronted her at the community center. "Pretending you were over him while he was setting up foundations for you?" "I didn't know about the foundation," Zara protested. "Come on, Zara. You really expect me to believe that?" Even Keisha was skeptical when Zara called to tell her about getting back together with Phoenix. "He embarrassed you, then disappeared for months, and now he's back with a big romantic gesture? Girl, that's not love, that's manipulation." The pressure was enormous. Every day brought new criticism, new doubts, new people telling them why their relationship was wrong. There were paparazzi outside Zara's apartment building. Business magazines speculated about Phoenix's distraction affecting his company's stock price. Social media was brutal, with strangers commenting on their relationship, their appearances, their backgrounds. One particularly bad week, Zara considered ending things again. "Maybe everyone's right," she told Phoenix as they walked through Central Park, trying to avoid photographers. "Maybe we're too different." Phoenix stopped walking. "Do you love me? You know I do. Do you trust me? Not my money? Not my status? Me." "Yes. Then that's all that matters. Everyone else can have their opinions. We're the only ones living our life." Chapter 11. The Breaking Point. The breaking point came when Victoria crossed a line. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on Zara's family, hoping to find something scandalous enough to force Phoenix to end the relationship. What she found was that Zara's father had been arrested for drug possession when Zara was 16, charges that were later dropped. But the arrest record remained. Victoria leaked the story to a gossip blog, along with photos of Zara's childhood neighborhood and details about her family's financial struggles. The headline read, "Billionaire's Girlfriend's Criminal Family Secrets Exposed." Zara was devastated. Not for herself, but for her father, who'd worked hard to overcome his past addiction and build a good life. "I can't do this anymore," she told Phoenix through tears. "I can't have my family dragged through the mud because of me. Zara, this is exactly what Victoria wants. Don't let her win." "It's not about winning." Zara exploded. "It's about my father getting looks at work because some rich woman decided to destroy my family for fun. It's about my sister's kids getting teased at school. This is real life, Phoenix. Not everyone can afford to ignore gossip." Phoenix felt helpless watching the woman he loved suffer because of his world. But he wasn't giving up. "Then we fight back," he said firmly. Phoenix's response was swift and devastating. He used every legal and business connection he had to destroy Victoria professionally and personally. First, he bought out her shares in their joint ventures, legally forcing her out of his company. Then he had his lawyers investigate her leak to the gossip blog, building a case for harassment and defamation. But most importantly, he went public with their relationship in a way that took control of the narrative. Phoenix arranged an interview with a major news network, and he asked Zara to do it with him. "I want the world to hear our story from us," he told her. "No more hiding, no more letting other people define what we are." The interview aired on a Sunday night. Phoenix and Zara sat together on the couch, her hand in his, and told their story honestly. Phoenix talked about growing up wealthy but lonely, about building his business empire but never finding personal happiness until he met Zara. Zara spoke about her grandmother, her work with at-risk youth, and her belief that love doesn't recognize social boundaries. "People say we're from different worlds," Zara said to the interviewer, "but Phoenix and I want the same things. We want to make a difference. We want to build something meaningful together. We want to love and be loved honestly." "The foundation isn't about me showing off," Phoenix added. "It's about Zara's vision becoming reality. She's the most capable, dedicated person I've ever met. I just happen to have resources that can help her change lives." The interview changed everything. Public opinion shifted. People started seeing them as a couple genuinely in love rather than a stereotype. Victoria's harassment campaign backfired spectacularly. She was forced to issue a public apology and ultimately left New York when her reputation became irreparably damaged. Slowly, the people who mattered began to come around. Marcus was the first. He visited Zara at the foundation's new offices and admitted he'd been wrong. "I was jealous," he said honestly. "I've been in love with you for years, and when Phoenix showed up, I saw everything I wasn't instead of seeing who he really was. He makes you happy. That should have been enough for me from the start." Phoenix's business associates began to respect Zara once they met her and saw her intelligence and passion. The foundation's early successes spoke for themselves. Even Keisha came around after Phoenix flew the whole family to New York for Zara's birthday, and she saw how he treated her sister, not like a trophy or a charity case, but like the most important person in his world. "Okay," Keisha admitted over birthday cake. "I like him, but if he ever hurts you again, I'm coming for him." Phoenix laughed. "I'd expect nothing less." The only opinion that really mattered, though, came from an unexpected source. 6 months after the interview, Zara was going through her grandmother's belongings that she'd been too heartbroken to sort through before. In the bottom of Rosa's jewelry box, she found a letter addressed to her. "My dear Zara," the letter read in her grandmother's careful handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, but I hope I got to see you find real love before I left this world. I want you to remember that love doesn't care about money or status or what other people think. Real love is about finding someone who sees your soul and chooses it every day. Don't let fear or pride keep you from happiness, baby girl. Love boldly, and don't apologize for it. Your grandfather and I came from different places too, and we built something beautiful together. Trust your heart. It knows the way. All my love, Grandma Rosa." Zara cried reading those words, feeling her grandmother's blessing on her relationship with Phoenix. 1 year after the foundation's launch, Phoenix knew he wanted to marry Zara. But he also knew the proposal had to be perfect, not expensive or flashy, but meaningful. He planned it for the anniversary of the day they'd first met, when he'd returned her bag. But instead of his penthouse or some exotic location, he chose the place where Zara felt most at home, the community center where she'd first worked. He arranged for all the kids Zara tutored to be there, along with Marcus and the other staff members. He'd worked with them for weeks to plan the surprise. When Zara walked into the center that evening, expecting a normal day of tutoring, she found the main room decorated with photos of her and Phoenix, her family, and all the people whose lives had been changed by the foundation. "What's all this?" she asked, confused. That's when Phoenix walked out from behind the makeshift stage where the kids sometimes performed. He was holding the same worn canvas bag that had started everything. "A year ago, you accidentally took my bag at the airport," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Best mistake of my life." The kids were giggling, barely containing their excitement as Phoenix walked toward Zara. "This bag led me to you, and you led me to everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a purpose, a reason to be better than I was." Phoenix got down on one knee, pulling out a ring box. The ring wasn't the biggest diamond money could buy. It was his grandmother's vintage engagement ring, simple and elegant and full of family history. "Zara Williams, you've taught me that real wealth isn't what you have in your bank account. It's who you choose to love and who chooses to love you back. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Zara could see all the kids holding up signs that spelled out "Marry him," and Marcus wiping his eyes in the corner. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." The community center erupted in cheers as Phoenix slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her like it was the first and last time all at once. 6 months later, Zara and Phoenix were married in the most unconventional wedding New York high society had ever seen. Instead of the plaza or some exclusive country club, they held their ceremony in Prospect Park, the same place where they'd taken those long walks during their courtship. The guest list was a beautiful mix of Phoenix's business associates, Zara's family and friends from the community center, and dozens of kids whose lives had been changed by the foundation. Zara wore her grandmother's vintage wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly. Phoenix wore his grandfather's cufflinks. Everything about the day honored their families while celebrating their future. Marcus was Zara's man of honor, and Keisha flew in from Atlanta to be matron of honor. Phoenix's best man was surprisingly his former driver, Carlos, who'd become one of his closest friends over the years. The ceremony was officiated by the pastor from the church where Rosa Williams had worshipped, and instead of traditional vows, Zara and Phoenix spoke from their hearts. "Phoenix," Zara said, her voice steady despite her tears, "you found me when I was lost. You saw my dreams when I'd forgotten them myself. You taught me that love isn't about being perfect matches. It's about choosing to grow together, to fight for each other, to build something bigger than either of us could create alone." "Zara," Phoenix replied, "you saved me from a life I didn't even realize was empty. You showed me that real success isn't measured in dollars or deals. It's measured in the lives you touch and the love you give. You made me want to be worthy of your heart." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience as they exchanged rings and sealed their promises with a kiss. The reception was held at the community center where Phoenix had proposed, transformed with fairy lights and flowers into something magical. Instead of a traditional wedding cake, they had dozens of small cakes from different bakeries around Brooklyn, representing all the communities the foundation served. Phoenix's speech during the reception brought down the house. "They say opposites attract," he began, looking at his new wife with absolute adoration. "But Zara and I aren't opposites, we're complements. Where I saw walls, she saw doors. Where I had resources, she had vision. Where I had success, she brought purpose." He paused, overcome with emotion. "A year and a half ago, I thought I had everything. Tonight, holding my wife's hand, surrounded by all of you who've become our chosen family, I know what having everything actually feels like." 5 years later, the Rosa Williams Foundation had grown beyond anyone's dreams. With centers in 12 cities, scholarship programs in over 50 schools, and thousands of lives changed, it had become one of the most successful community development organizations in the country. Zara stood in her office, looking out at the playground where kids from the local elementary school were playing during their after-school program. At 31, she'd become a respected voice in social work, invited to speak at conferences and consult on policy. But what made her happiest was simpler than all that professional success. Phoenix walked into her office carrying their 6-month-old daughter, Maya Rosa Blackwell. The baby had Phoenix's green eyes and Zara's dimpled smile, and she was already the most loved child in Brooklyn. "How'd the board meeting go?" Zara asked, kissing her husband and taking their daughter. "Approved the expansion to Chicago and Detroit," Phoenix said, wrapping his arms around his girls. Maya was the star of the meeting. "I think she's going to be running this foundation someday." They stood there together, watching the kids play outside, holding their daughter between them. Phoenix had stepped back from active management of Blackwell Industries to focus on the foundation and his family. His net worth had actually grown in the past 5 years, but he measured wealth differently now. Any regrets? Zara asked softly, the same question she'd asked him on their wedding day. Only one, Phoenix replied, and Zara's heart skipped until he continued. I regret that it took a random bag switch for me to find you. I wish I'd been smart enough to go looking sooner. Zara laughed, the same laugh that had made Phoenix fall in love with her in her tiny apartment all those years ago. Good answer, she said, standing on her toes to kiss him. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with life. Kids played, parents worked, dreams were built and chased and sometimes caught. And in their office, overlooking it all, the billionaire and the social worker who'd found each other by accident held their daughter and planned their next adventure in love. Some people had said they were too different to work. Others had said their love wouldn't last. But Phoenix and Zara had learned the most important lesson of all. When you find the person who makes your heart feel like home, you fight for that love with everything you have, and they lived happily, purposefully, completely ever after. This story shows us that real love transcends social boundaries, that true wealth is measured in relationships and purpose, and that sometimes the most beautiful love stories start with the simplest coincidences. Phoenix and Zara's journey reminds us that when we find someone who sees our soul and chooses it every day, we should fight for that love with everything we have. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more. Till next time, much love from 3Ts.